Upon a world not unlike our own, around a sun, there lies a continent that is at the threshold of renewal and change. It's in something that's like our own late Middle Ages, and at the threshold of that continent lies a misty isle, and nested unto the interior of that island lies a kingdom. A place so rich with untold possibility, infused with its own rules of cause and effect, of right and wrong. This kingdom, so confident in its own reality, and so inviting in its possibility, is named Kaldor, and it lies upon the Isle of Hârn. I'm the Complex Games apologist, and today I want to show you this place, where I think that your role-playing adventures could abide. For my part, a lot of the reason why I'm so excited to get Kaldor to the table in my fantasy role-playing games, and why I have this sense of fantastic wonder about it, is because of its scope and scale. It's not massive, nor is it teeming with millions of people. Instead, what's fantastic and provokes a sense of otherwhere about Kaldor is that the proud feudal castles, the enterprising work of the millwrights on the riverbanks, and the pavilion tents and its knights arrayed for the tournament of chivalry are all part of a proud outpost of civilization amid the vast and splendid desolation of wilderness that is the island of Hârn. Let's get you more of a real, tangible sense of scale. This is Hârn, and these are the British Isles of our own Earth. I went to a little bit of effort to get these images side by side and to scale. Now here, inside this red circle, is the entirety of the Kingdom of Kaldor. Now if we move the circle over to Britain and we look for a relevant medieval example, what we find is the Kingdom of Mercia, which was but one kingdom among 7 on Britain in the 8th and 9th centuries before the Viking invasions and the Danelaw. Now here, as with everything else that we're going to talk about, it's important not to get caught up in one-to-one comparisons of Kaldor with things from the real world, because Kaldor's development level is certainly much later and much more high Middle Ages than Mercia was. To drive that point home that Hârn and Kaldor are really otherworldly and fantastic, let's look at the relative populations of just England. At the threshold of the High Middle Ages, when the Domesday Book was made, England's population was between 1.25 and 2 million people. On the other hand, Hârn, with more than double the land area of the British Isles put together, not just England, has something like 1 million people on it. And Kaldor by itself has 105,000 souls. And all that wide open space is not something that is forgotten as Hârn and Kaldor are built up into a world. The wide open spaces of Hârn, they give cause for great merchant caravans to trek across between the east and western portions of the isle. For there to be terribly isolated and lost pieces of civilization for the players to rediscover in their travels. And they give the room for the tribal barbarian peoples to continue to persist and harry the civilized kingdoms. And that third point does not go forgotten. It has a great deal to do with how Kaldor came to be, its origins as a kingdom. But before we speak of Kaldor's beginnings in the past, let us speak of Kaldor in the now, of 720 Tuzen Reckoning. The Kaldor of the present is a thriving, feudal kingdom. The manorial system of agriculture has a firm hold on Kaldor's economic and social organization. For centuries, the knights of the kingdom have kept at bay the several barbarian tribes that surround Kaldor's periphery. And as the Church of Lorani, the goddess of justice, chivalry, and knighthood, has grown more and more ensconced in Kaldor, holding its own lands and responsible for the moral education of the children of the nobility. For the time being, the feudal order is secure, and the merchants, with their coins and their wagons and their truck, and the serfs in the fields, are not likely to move into higher positions, at least for the coming decades. Some kingdoms are defined by a religious unit, or a cultural or ethnic division that gives the people within an identity separate from the people without. While the people of Kaldor do pray to different gods than the Tailda, Cath, and Pug Island barbarians on their fringes, everyone in this region of Hârn at least shares the same language of Hârnic. So instead, Kaldor is much more defined by its geography. The limitations and the scope of this place are centered around the river that is its lifeblood, the River Kald and its tributaries. The Kald has but one bridge, at the capital city of Tashal, and beyond lies the barbarian territory of the Cath. The River Ossel secures the southern frontier from the Pagailan barbarians, and is also crossed by but one ancient bridge. The Kald is wide, deep, and stable enough to host barge traffic, at least between Tashal and Jedis Keep in the south. Yet the Kald affords no access to the sea. Kaldor is truly landlocked and has no port, and thus all of its trade must come by caravan across the Ganin Trail in the south, the Trowbridge Way to the west, and the Fur Road to the north. And that is because the River Kald plunges over Talim Falls, a great torrent of water beyond its southern frontier, and beyond lies the forbidding forests of Avail. Yet all hope for a great score of wealth for a young mercantiler is not lost, for through Kaldor is the only way into the kingdom of the Kudzul, or Dwarves of Hârn, whose wares are coveted across the Misty Isle, and upon the continent of Lithia beyond. Within the interior of Kaldor, where the lands are not tilled, the terrain is mostly an alluvial woodland, though there are some hilly areas that play host to mines that keep the kingdom's forges well supplied. So at this point you might be saying to yourself, that's a nice geography lesson, but full stop, all back 2/3. Where's the adventure? Notwithstanding the whole medieval society and feudal order thing, Kaldor seems like a pretty sweet place to be. And the answer to that question is that not all is well in Kaldor. Something is a-rotten, so the saying goes. And to put an even finer point on the Shakespeare reference, it's because the king is aged, his health is deteriorating, and the succession is uncertain. There is no clear heir to the throne. So there is the barest whiff of the stunning depth and verisimilitude that lies in the kingdom of Kaldor. It's a place that's come alive for me in my tabletop gaming like no other of my own creation, nor of published settings. There's a sense that things fit together, that there's cause and effect, and when it comes to the Kaldoric succession crisis, the latent meta-plot which is about to unfold and yet is never told by the publishers of this amazing setting, because it's for you to decide, is such a compelling story. It's so many places where the player characters can become involved, be they humble or noble, be they frontiersmen encountering the most exotic and fantastic elements of Hârn. The demons, the monsters, the orcs, the creatures on the frontiers, or whether they be conniving and scheming in the halls of power. And for me, that's the most exciting and inviting part of Hârn, and Kaldor in particular, is that no matter which direction the game that you sit down to play ends up going in, there's a rabbit hole of verisimilitude and exploration. There's an abundance of open-ended places for you to develop as a game master and as a group of players. An abundance of NPCs, personalities, and life stories are yet to be discovered. But all of these glowing angels of role-playing game content are not crowded onto the head of a pin. There's abundant space for you to develop your own NPCs and places within Hârn. There's a sense of openness and a fantastic possibility. By starting at a really compelling, fantastic, but low fantasy baseline, the kind of elements that you introduce to amp it up and turn it into a high fantasy, if you want to, will be your own for you to choose. And if you ever have need for a person, place, or thing in your adventures to fill in a gap in your own creations, then the abundant creations of the fans of Hârn and Kaldor, and the companies that are responsible for this setting, are but an arm's reach away. I invite you to begin your own studies of Hârn and Kaldor, so that you can get it to your table and experience how compelling and how transportative it can be. Fall through the looking glass into this great place for gaming.
I'm the Complex Games Apologist, and this video has been an example of the kind of content that I can create if I really take it to the next level. And so I have created a Patreon page where you can support what's happening here on the channel. And of course there will be a Discord, and there'll be the opportunity for patrons to request what they think would be a great direction for the channel to go in next. And as the community of patrons develops, there's the potential for me to create bespoke adventure content for your tables, and to create settings of my own that might see publication and development here on the channel. That's the sort of doorways that we can step through together as we build up a community of folks that are interested in these settings and these game systems that are off the beaten path. I try to create something here on the channel that is up at the level of A-list YouTube within the means that I have. And we can get even closer to that and possibly into the awareness of people in your gaming hobby as we develop the channel. It's been a great adventure over the last 2 years to get to the point that we're at now with 2,000 subscribers, and I hope to go even further with your help. Thank you. I'm the Complex Games Apologist.